Welcome back into CBS Sports HQ. We are officially in draft season. Taking a look at Ryan Wilson's latest mock draft, making some changes to this. Oftentimes, he's had a couple of teams, whether it's the Commanders or the Cardinals, not really the Cardinals, but the Patriots, Giants even trading up to get a quarterback, specifically Caleb Williams, #1 overall. But right now, he is the Bears staying put and taking Caleb Williams. Not only that, a handful of quarterbacks going in the top 10. We're about to break it all down. Bringing in Ryan Wilson. We are also still joined here on set by our Brady Quinn. So, Ryan, why do you got the Bears staying put at #1, taking Caleb Williams?
This is going to be an incredibly difficult decision, Amanda, for the Chicago Bears, because they have to figure out, #1, what they have in Justin Fields, which seems like a weird thing to say after year 3. But when you go back and watch Justin's tape this year, there are a lot of reasons for optimism, and then there are still times where he's not doing the things you want a third-year quarterback to do, especially one going into year 4, the final year of his rookie deal, and you may have to end up paying him. The Bears moved on from Luke Getsy, the offensive coordinator, which signals a couple things. Maybe they bring in someone who can work with Justin Fields, or maybe they bring in someone who can work with QB1 since they have that #1 overall pick for the 2nd straight year. I don't know what's going to happen, and I'm split. I love Justin Fields, and I want him to be successful, but part of me also thinks Caleb Williams is such a special talent, and there's so much to love about the way he plays, and that season did not go the way he wanted to at USC, in part because the offensive line wasn't very good and the defense was worse. It was not because of Caleb Williams. Now, you can point to the second half of the first half of the Notre Dame game where he disappeared, but I was pretty impressed with the way he played over the course of that season. Never quit, never gave up. There'll be some questions about his father and his involvement, but in terms of being a football player, Brady, I think that he feels like he's going to be special if he can just focus on the football.
No, there's no doubt about it. He's the best quarterback in this draft class. He encompasses so many extraordinary traits. The ability really to, I think, throw off platform, create different arm angles, buy time, and utilize his mobility. And I think people underestimate, too, how good he is, how strong he is as a runner. He is tough to bring down when he does take off and run downfield. So, you know, look, this is a good problem for the Chicago Bears to have. You have the #1 overall pick. You have a quarterback that you might even view as a franchise quarterback. It really comes down to, do they want to potentially be closer to extending that quarterback, trade back, get more draft talent around Justin Fields to help build for the future, or are they comfortable with kind of where they're at? And do they look at it and say, maybe we can get something back in exchange for Justin Fields? We take Caleb Williams at #1. We have another top 10 pick that we can help build around Caleb Williams with, get a fresh start, and still have him on his rookie contract for the next 3 years. That's really what's at stake here for Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus as they move forward. So, you know, I don't even know if you can go wrong either way. And the reason why I say that is because I think that highly of Caleb Williams as a prospect, but also Justin Fields. And I think Ryan Poles has been successful so far, being able to trade back, accumulate picks, doing something with those picks to help Justin Fields succeed. So, look, the first thing that needs to take place is figuring out who that offensive coordinator is going to be. And I think part of it, if I'm interviewing for that job, is I'm saying to Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus, who's my quarterback going to be? Like, what's your plan for this? Because if I'm coming in with Justin Fields, I'm probably going to have a different way of looking at things as opposed to if I'm working with Caleb Williams and a rookie who's still getting acquainted to the NFL going into 2024. So it's going to be 2 different conversations. But if I'm taking that job, I got to know who that quarterback's going to be next year.
From a quarterback perspective, I mean, would it be detrimental to bring in Caleb Williams? Would you start, if you got rid of Justin Fields, I mean, how much of a difference is that going to be? It's taken Justin Fields a while to get to this point. We saw the Bears cruising at the end of the season. Would you not want to stick with that and just build around him?
No, to a degree, that's what I would do based on what I've seen so far. But, you know, they might have Caleb Williams ranked so high as a draft prospect that they can't continue to move on in that direction. Like, I think it would make some sense to build around Justin Fields, but the truth of the matter is they might feel that highly about Caleb Williams, or they feel like he can come in and this team's already at a better point for him to take over as a rookie and be successful. And just imagine if they get him another potential target to throw to outside of DJ Moore and Cole Kmet and Mooney and some of those other pieces. They can still do that. So this is a much improved team, and in particular offense, from where it was when Justin Fields first got there. And so I think that's where you feel probably more comfortable bringing a rookie into it. But there's also the case for, what's someone going to give up to trade up to number 1 to take Caleb Williams? Is it Washington from number 2 to number 1, where that's not going to be quite as many picks? If it's Atlanta at 8, that could be a boatload of picks moving up to number 1. So I think you also have to listen to what's on the table and then kind of look at that sort of king's ransom you could potentially get for that number 1 pick.
You mentioned a handful of teams in the top 10 that are looking for a quarterback. Ryan Wilson's latest mock draft has 4 quarterbacks going in the top 10. 1, 2, 3. Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels there, and then the Falcons at 8 taking Michael Penix Jr. What is the chances that we see this many quarterbacks go so high?
I mean, you could easily see it. I think you could make the case that there's 6 potentially first-round draftable quarterbacks. These are going to be 4 of them. The ones you aren't going to see are J.J. McCarthy, who just declared, as well as Bo Nix. So I think you could also make a case. And really, I think after Caleb Williams and Drake May, there is going to be differing opinions on Jaden Daniels and Michael Penix, Bo Nix, J.J. McCarthy, as far as how teams see those players. You know, with Jaden Daniels, he saved his best year for his last year, winning a Heisman, showcasing the ability to improve as a passer, but how dynamic he can be as a runner. Michael Penix was absolutely phenomenal his final 2 years at Washington, and kind of reminds me of C.J. Stroud as far as the downfield passing and accuracy downfield. Unfortunately, didn't finish on a high note like Stroud did. Nix led the NCAA in completion percentage, set a record this year. He was phenomenal, is obviously very experienced, ready to go, has athleticism too. And then finally, J.J. McCarthy. I mean, all you can say is he capped everything off as a winner. I don't know that the system really played always to his strengths of showcasing what he's capable of, but I think when teams break down J.J. McCarthy, they're going to love all the intangibles and everything they saw on film and probably going to be able to do more with him at the NFL level. But, I mean, Ryan, is this obviously how you rank these top 4 quarterbacks, and even past that number, how would you see this group looking?
No, I think you're exactly right. I think the top 4 as we see them here, and then Bo Nix would be number 5 for me, and then J.J. McCarthy. Bo Nix and J.J. McCarthy for me right now are probably day 2 guys, but a lot can change. I mean, it's January 16th, and the draft is on April 25th, and we know how much can change in that time. But in terms of the top 4 guys there, and I think you're exactly right, Brady, it's going to be Caleb and Drake, and then things will get interesting. But I said this to Rick Spielman on With the First Pick podcast a few weeks ago. Would it be insane that 5 years from now, Jaden Daniels ends up being the best quarterback in this draft class? I don't think it's outrageous. Is it a high possibility situation? Maybe not, but if it's a 35% chance, that's why teams take risks on quarterbacks, because you just don't know how it's going to work out. A year ago, we were talking about C.J. Stroud having that Georgia game, and where had that been his entire college career? And now he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So, this is more art than science when you talk about these quarterbacks, and there's a lot to love about all these players. But I think Caleb and Drake are clear-cut 1 and 2. Drake didn't have quite the season that Caleb did, or even Jaden Daniels for that matter. But I think Jaden's closer to 2 than perhaps we're willing to realize right now. I think the thing with Michael Penix, and Brady touched on this, is the injury history. And I've talked to teams that like him in the first round, and I've talked to teams that like him closer to round 3. So it's going to be what flavor of quarterback are you looking for, and that can determine how high someone like a Michael Penix Jr. or a Bo Nix or J.J. McCarthy actually end up going off the board.
I want to take another look at the top 10 real quick. So, Jack, if you could put up that top 10 graphic. I want you to key in on something, okay? For all these places that are selecting quarterbacks in this mock draft, Chicago Bears will have a new offensive coordinator. Still haven't decided that. Washington, new head coach. New England, Gerard Mayo's taking over, first-time head coach. We'll see what that staff looks like. You go on down to Atlanta, new head coach. You know, there's a common denominator here. The situation and circumstance that all these quarterbacks enter into, to Ryan's point about what these guys look like 5 years down the road, is largely going to dictate how their career go, the success that they have. Too oftentimes we write off guys because they enter into a bad situation, or they enter into a coaching staff that could be a lame duck coaching staff. They're there for a year, they're fired, they moved on. They're already learning a second system the second year. It's incredibly hard to do when you don't have any sort of consistency or stability. And that's what I'm most curious to see, is which one of these organizations that has a head coach intact, that has a good solid foundation, is willing to take one of these quarterbacks and maybe go the Green Bay route. Like, I do wonder kind of, is there going to be a scenario in there at some point where a team looks at some of these prospects and says, they're too good to pass up on? And I'm looking at what's happening in Green Bay, what happened from Brett Favre to Rodgers to Jordan Love, and now what we're seeing in Jordan Love, and going, maybe that is the best way to do it. If one of these guys falls to us that we absolutely love, even though it's not a need right now. It may be in a few years. We feel like that's going to pay off dividends. It takes the right type of organization and situation and circumstance for that to play out.
You talked about all those teams with coaching vacancies right now. A lot of questions still surrounding the Pittsburgh Steelers. What's going to happen with Mike Tomlin? Not that he would be fired. Potentially, could he step away? They're quarterback needy. Some people would say and argue they're sitting at number 20 right now. Ryan's latest mock draft has him staying put, taking an edge rusher. Brady, if you're the Steelers, what are you doing at 20?
It depends on what quarterback could be there for you, and this isn't what I'm doing. I think I'm more reading the tea leaves of what has taken place in Pittsburgh after this past year. Now, look, they drafted Kenny Pickett in the first round. I thought if he's healthy enough to be a backup, he should have been out there playing. He gives you a little bit more different dynamic element, I think, in his ability to extend plays, run the football than Mason Rudolph did. That point's now moot. But moving forward, I think you look at it and say, all right, well, if Mason Rudolph's starting when Kenny Pickett's healthy, clearly they don't think as highly of Kenny Pickett moving forward. So would they take the right quarterback, or would they trade up to take a quarterback in this year's draft class, given that it is loaded with a bunch of different guys? Ryan, did you contemplate that at all in this particular draft with the Steelers sitting at 20?
Oh, 100%. And Brady, I'll tell you exactly when that thought occurred to me. It was as Josh Allen was sprinting 52 yards down the field on that breakaway. My first thought was, if the Steelers could find a way to get Jaden Daniels in a division where those quarterbacks are absolutely stacked. And to your point a moment ago, if you have the infrastructure in place, if you have the ownership and the head coach in place in which you can be patient with a quarterback, it's not the worst idea in the world. Is it going to cost you a ton? Absolutely. But what I come back to when you talk about the Steelers in particular, Kenny Pickett hasn't worked out, and you could blame Matt Canada for a lot of that, no doubt about it. Maybe a Bobby Slowick situation is one in which he's certainly playing a lot better. But the Steelers a few years ago traded from 20 to 10 to get Devin Bush, a linebacker. So it's not outrageous to think they go from 20 to 8 or 20 to 7. Pay a premium if they have a quarterback they love. I'm not saying they should absolutely do it under any circumstance, but I would imagine it's something you want to consider. Mason Rudolph's out of contract, and the fact that I have to say Mason Rudolph's out of contract should tell you how seriously they should probably be considering their quarterback future and what that looks like.
Ryan, beyond the quarterbacks, the entire top 10 offensive players, not a single defensive player in your latest top 10.
What's up with that? No love for the defensive players? Like, no, not Wiggins at cornerback or Turner as an edge rush? I mean, I know you sort of sprinkled them in after the top 10, but I'm like, well, what the heck happened there? Is it all offense now moving forward in the top 10?
Yeah, so I'm looking at it, and look, realistically, the Chargers could go edge rusher at 5, but are you going to pass on a Fashanu or an Alt there if you're trying to protect Justin Herbert? Tennessee needs edge rush help, but they got to protect Will Levis. The Falcons need edge rush help defensively, but if there's a quarterback there, are you willing to make that trade? And then Chicago at 9, it's been popular to give them a Jared Verse or a Dallas Turner, but Malik Neighbors and then Caleb Williams, is that too good to pass up? So I take your point, and when this first played out, I was like, oh, this is pretty shocking. And it's been quite some time that we've seen a draft where defensive players don't go in the top 10. Does this happen? I don't think so, but if we get a run, Brady, on teams trading for quarterbacks and then wanting to get this offensive line help, and this offensive line class is deeper than last year's, and even the wide receivers, conceivably there's a situation where we see these guys last till 11 or 12?
Well, here's what I'd say about this, though, and as far as, the offense being a premium. Yes, quarterbacks for sure. But I think this is a really deep wide receiver class. I think it's a deep tackle class. And I think sometimes what happens with draft economics is scarcity comes into play. So when you look at a D tackle like Newton out of Illinois, there's not many who look like him on tape. So if you're going to take a defensive tackle or you feel like that's a need, you've got a high grade on him, you almost have to kind of take them in that spot, or Verse and Turner versus some of the other subsequent edge rushers, the way you'd rank those draft prospects as far as edge rushers. If you feel like there's a big drop off from that guy to the next, you almost have to think about that at some point, of taking the scarcity, the less popular pick, if there's less of them, than going with a offensive player where there might be a little more depth there.
You mentioned a deep wide receiver class. That is a player that Ryan has the Eagles taking. The Eagles, you could argue, need a lot of help. Maybe it does start with their head coach. You have them taking Keon Coleman out of Florida State. Brady, what do you think about that pick to the Eagles?
Okay, I don't know. I mean, you got an aging,
what we saw from the Eagles,
you've got an aging defensive front. You've got a secondary that needs a lot of help too. It's tough to call at that point in time in the draft. I think Keon Coleman's a first-round prospect the way he looked out there, but I have no idea at this point in time in the draft if it's going to be wide receiver or a bunch of other potential positions for them.
I'll just say this. They literally could have used Keon Coleman last night. A.J. Brown didn't play. Julio Jones got concussed, and they needed him there. Coleman, excuse me. Yeah, I want to call him Keon Carpenter. But I will say this also. I made this before. Jason Kelce reportedly is set to retire after 13 seasons. Another option, Brady, is Graham Barton, who plays left tackle for Duke, who will probably move inside to guard or center the next level to provide some depth there. Yes, they have Landon Dickerson. Yes, they have Cam Jurgens. But the offensive line has struggled all season with the blitz, and that's not entirely the offensive line's fault in and of itself. The coaching has something to do with that. But in much the same way we saw Zion Johnson have that success moving inside when he was drafted by the Chargers out of BC, I think that could be a path for a Graham Barton. And the Eagles would make sense there, too, if they don't just draft every wide receiver with every pick.
The Eagles have a lot of work to do. Ryan, we appreciate it. You can find Ryan's latest mock drafts on CBSSports.com. Latest episode of With the First Pick, the podcast that Ryan hosts, all about the NFL draft. Him and Emery Hunt trading off making picks for selections 1 through 18. There are also some big trades going down. Make sure to download and follow.